What if I told you that this 6-year-old graphics card performs just as good as the Nvidia GTX 1060 and RX 580 can be had for pretty good prices? Let's see how the Nvidia GTX 780 Ti performs in 2019. Released back in November of 2013, the 780 Ti rivaled AMD's flagship 290X, which had very similar performance to the 780 while coming in at a very competitive price of $549 compared to the 780's $649 price tag. The Ti of the 780 was released soon after the 290X. Built on the 28nm GK11OB processor, the 780 Ti is based on the Kepler architecture. It packs in 2,880 CUDA cores, 3GB of GDDR5 VRAM, which is clocked at 7012 MHz. The card has a base clock of 875 MHz and a boost of 928. It has a whopping 250 watt TDP, which will definitely limit me from doing any type of overclocking because of my 450 watt power supply. This card supports DX12, OpenGL 4.6, and Vulkan 1.1.103. For benchmarks, I won't be overclocking because again, the 780 Ti needs at least a 600 watt power supply, and mine is only 450. I do plan installing a modded VBIOS to this card to do more extreme overclocking once I get my power supply situation sorted out. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and make sure you have notifications enabled so you don't miss out. Anyways, I'll be testing Fortnite, Apex Legends, Forza 4 Demo, Ring of Elysium, and some synthetic benchmarks. My system is an overclocked Ryzen 3 2200G running at 3.9 GHz on my Asus Prime B350M-A. I have two 4GB sticks of Crucial Ballistic Sport DDR4 overclocked at 2800 MHz in dual channel. The CPU is being cooled by an Arctic Freezer Extreme Revision 2. The case I have is the Deepcool Matrix 55 with two exhaust and intake fans. I also have an RGB LED strip which should help increase performance by at least 20%. Anyways, starting off in Fortnite with the Epic preset, motion blur turned off, and the frame limit set to unlimited, the 780 Ti averaged 106 FPS, got a maximum of 417, and a low of 0. Yeah, that frame limit might have been a good idea. But anyways, this is being tested on my 1440 by 900 monitor, so the numbers might differ on say a 1080p monitor. So keep that in mind as you watch this, though the performance difference really shouldn't be that big anyways. Moving on to Apex Legends using max settings, the 780 Ti averaged 54 FPS, got a max of 141, and its low was 33. If you wanted better frame rates, then you could lower the settings, but this was still very playable. The 780 Ti handled it no problem. Moving on to Forza Horizon 4, this is the demo, so it might be different from the full game in terms of graphical quality, or so I've heard. Anyways, I didn't get fraps to work, so I ended up running the in-game benchmark. I'll display those on the screen right here. The benchmark results really do show what the actual performance of the game was. The Ultra preset got a little bit of a lower frame rate, coming in at more like 34 to 35 FPS. And the high preset was a little bit higher at the upper 40s and lower 40s. Ring of Elysium, with the settings maxed out, it got a maximum of 441 FPS, an average of 87, and a low of 46. Moving on to synthetic benchmarks, in Skydiver, the 780 Ti got a combined score of 21,775 and a graphics score of 34,571. In Night Raid, it got a combined score of 19,567 and a graphics score of 37,515. Moving on to the more demanding benchmarks, first off with Time Spy, got a combined score of 2,792 and a graphics score of 2,717. And finally, in Firestrike, the 780 Ti got a combined score of 8,878 and a graphics score of 10,403. Moving on, in Cinebench R15, the 780 Ti got 88.31 FPS in the OpenGL test. In Superposition Benchmark with the 1080 Medium preset, 780 Ti scored 7,547, and with 1080 High, it scored 5,322. In Unigine Heaven benchmark, using the Extreme preset, 780 Ti got a score of 1788 with 71 average FPS, 27.3 minimum, and 154.5 being the max. Nvidia claimed that the 780 Ti was
It is cool, quiet, and fast.
Let's just see how cool and quiet it really is. I ran Furmark for about half an hour, and well, it's not exactly quiet, but it did stay at 82 to 85 degrees Celsius, which 83C is just its max safe temperature. Blower style cards perform best in more tight PC cases. I mean, as the name suggests, it literally is blowing the hot air to the exhaust of the card. I do have a project plan to really bring out all the potential from this card, so make sure you're subscribed and have notifications enabled so you don't miss out. So, to answer the question, is the GTX 780 Ti still worth buying in 2019? Now, it's a great card, but there are still some downsides. One of them being that it requires a lot of power. In most mid-range PC builds, a 450 to 550 watt power supply is what is usually recommended, because mid-range cards on the current Nvidia and AMD generations are much more power efficient than they were in the past 5 or 6 years. You'd even have enough power still to upgrade to a higher tier card, whether it be from Nvidia or AMD. But I got a 450 watt power supply, thinking that I'd upgrade to maybe a GTX 1050 Ti or 1060, or even 570, but I ended up with this card instead, so now I have to fork up some extra cash to upgrade the power supply. So keep this in mind that if your power supply isn't already sufficient to power the card, you'd probably be better off just going with something newer because of the added cost of having to replace your current power supply. Speaking of newer graphics cards, that leads into the second downside, VRAM. The 780 Ti was said to have 4GB of VRAM like any other graphics card, such as the 290X, but as it really turns out, it only has 3. Back in late 2013, early 2014, that wouldn't have been a problem, but as more and more games are continuing to benefit from more VRAM, the 3GB of VRAM on the 780 Ti will definitely hold you back in some, if not most, modern games. I actually did something like this in Forza Horizon 4, the Vega 8 graphics, testing to see if removing 4 of my 8GB of system memory would affect performance. I really knew what would happen, but if I had more system memory, the 2200G would run Forza 4 no problem. You'll see with other videos testing the 2200G on Forza 4 that their systems had 16GB of RAM and the game ran fine, but in my case it's very close, but because the Vega graphics use some of my system memory, the game becomes choppy. My point is, while the 780 Ti has a fair amount of horsepower, the low VRAM amount will restrict higher settings in some games. Other cards like the GTX 1060 and RX 580 have similar graphical performance to the older 780 Ti, though depending on the game they will either be outperformed by or outperform the older card. But they have much higher VRAM amounts, the 1060 being able to double the 780 Ti's amount, the 580 having up to 8GB. The 780 Ti is also louder and gets pretty warm. So to conclude, if you can find a GTX 1060 6GB, not 3, or RX 580 8GB, not 4, for good prices, then you really can't go wrong. These are based on newer architectures, are more efficient in terms of power draw, and more up to date on cooling technologies. But if you can get a good deal on a better cooled GTX 780 Ti and are aware of the power requirements, the GTX 780 Ti, as old as it is, still puts up a pretty good fight in 2019, and like I said before, all these benchmarks on the card have had no overclocks. But even without modding, this card can be overclocked to achieve better performance, on a non-reference model of course. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave a comment and I'll do my best to get back to you. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. While you're there, consider subscribing to the channel and hit that bell for more quality tech videos. Anyways, thanks for watching and I'll see you later.